To our first policy and strategy meeting of 2025. I'll call on Councillor Hill to open with karakia.
Kia ora, Chair, ngam kia koe, kara kia tātou, tue ki runga, tue ki raro, tue ki roto, tue ki waho, tue a tātou te tangata, ki te kaupapa o te hui nei, ki te kaupapa o te rangi nei, mauri ora ki a tātou katoa.
Thank you. So just welcome. We've got some people on Zoom this morning. Normal housekeeping matters. Toilets are out to the left. If we get an earthquake, drop and hide under the tables. Hopefully we won't get a fire alarm. And the news media is in the room. And in addition, we'll be on Council's YouTube channel. Right, so apologies this morning. I've got apologies for lateness from Mayor King and Councillor Walker, who are in a meeting, and apologies from Councillor Greening. Would someone like to move that those be accepted? I've got moved Councillor Ellis, seconded Councillor Maru. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. So I've only got one public forum today, so it's Sky in relation to the Waimea Inlet Forum. Sky, you've got 10 minutes. So you've been here before, and I understand your overnight video presentation was too big, so we're using the first one, as I understand it.
Oh, that's fine. Oh, thanks. Davine Stevens is the other co-chair from Ngāti Tama. She had other commitments this morning, so was not able to join us, but she sends her apologies. The staff have a report for you that's detailed. I'm not going to go through the details, but I just wanted to provide a little bit of context of the group and the strategy, who we are, what we do, and then some examples of the really nice collaboration that's happening and the inspiring work that's happening around the inlet. So the Waimea Inlet Strategy and Action Plan is a non-statutory document. It's aimed at maintaining and improving the health of the Waimea Inlet. Is this gonna work? There are 7 overarching objectives. This is quite wordy, you don't need to take it all in, but just to give a sense of what they cover, it's a holistic set of objectives that represent cultural and ecological and social values. Under each objective, there are actions identified, and a different member organisation takes the lead on each action. Not all of it is funded, but the plan does provide a compelling collective investment-ready document that's proven really useful when new funding opportunities come up. Apologies again for the complicated diagram, but really what we wanted to portray here is that there's a collaboration with a whole lot of agencies and community partners that are working together to achieve the outcomes for this plan. From TDC, Councillors Ellis and Kinnenmonth are members of the coordination group, and Councillor Sanson from NCC. Staff members from both councils are always present and very active on the coordinating group, and also there are members from DOC, Te Tauihu, Iwi, TET, Tasman Bay Guardians, Waimea Inlet Forum. So it's a really genuine collaboration. The coordination group meets quarterly. We review the implementation of the plan and monitor progress and identify opportunities for collaboration. One of the, just getting into the objectives, one of the key objectives is around restoring and protecting habitats. this is just an example of, I'll just go through some of the range of work that's happening. This is an example of one of TDC's restoration sites. This is restoring salt marsh habitat. Salt marsh has been severely degraded over the decades. It's a really important habitat for native species, and also provides an important role in buffering against storm surges and wave action. It's an important consideration with sea level rise. So this is a key area. A key action in the strategy is around protecting and restoring salt marsh. In this case, they are simply trialling letting more seawater into an area that previously would have had more inundation. So opening up some floodgates more widely so that more water can come in and provide better optimal conditions for salt marsh to naturally restore. This example here is further around towards Nelson. It's led by Nelson City Council, and it's what's called a Chenia Ridge. They've built that little low wall of rocks there, just created a little bund that dampens the wave action and creates a more gentle environment where the salt marsh species can restore themselves. So this is a trial that's happening at the moment. Another initiative that is planting natives around the margin of the inlet. This is a photo from one of TET's Battle for the Banded Rail planting days. Over the last 10 years, 178,000 plants have been added to the Waimea Inlet margins. And then TDC, Nelson City Council and other community groups have added many more. TET has hosted approximately 300 volunteer planting and plant maintenance days. These are really popular, seeing increasing numbers of people showing up to these days, and also with a lot of regular supporters, really committed, a lot of commitment from the community towards this work. One of the targets that was set in the 2018 Waimea Inlet strategy was to increase the naturally vegetated estuary margin by 10 kilometres to an average width of 10 metres by 2030. And one of the outcomes that I'm super proud of is that collectively now by 2025, we've really overshot that target. We've achieved 17 kilometres, 683 metres of estuary margin restored since 2018. So it's an example of, even though the goal might have felt quite ambitious when it was originally set in 2018, sort of based on the history of restoration up to that point, that having an investment-ready plan can be really useful when funding opportunities come up. So through Jobs for Nature and 1 Billion Trees, we, between TET and TDC, we secured a lot of funding to do this restoration work. And it really, having that plan was quite instrumental in that. Protecting Indigenous species is another really important aspect of the plan. This is Tracy from the coordinator for the Battle for the Banded Rail Trapping Project. Controlling predators is a key part of creating safe habitat for vulnerable species that live in the estuary. There are now over 1,250 traps bordering the margin of the estuary, and more than 12,700 predators have been trapped to date. That would be over about the last 10 years. The flagship species for this program is the banded rail. It's quite shy. It was once really abundant and was commonly seen running through people's gardens, but now it's at risk and declining, and it's not that easy to spot. Over the last 10 years, we've been doing surveys every 2 years to try and assess whether the predator control is having a beneficial having beneficial results for the banded rail. Again, you can see a great collaboration here. Graham Elliott from a principal scientist from Department of Conservation is there instructing the crew on the methods for surveying. And there's Richard Hilton from TDC in there, and a great group of volunteers. Over the 10 years since surveys began, so I was just looking at the numbers. In 2014, there were 31 footprints found, and they are spread in a few sites around the estuary. In 2022, there were 85 footprints found. Obviously, this is just a survey; it's not a census of the birds, but it is indicating that that the birds are doing better, and there are some areas now where there's significant concentration of birds that wasn't seen previously. So we're really pleased with the indications from those surveys. This is another very vulnerable species. Plants might not get our attention so often, but the coastal peppercress is the third most endangered plant in New Zealand. It's on the brink of extinction. And this shows, again, a great collaboration here with volunteers. That's a trainee ranger from NMIT and DOC staff working together to create these beds to protect that little peppercress plant from going extinct. Just finally, some quick reflections. Mostly, I just wanted to really highlight that this is a positive collaboration between communities, council, and other agencies. Overall, the progress on the plan is heartening. There are some areas that might be a bit behind or slow, but I think overall it's really it's been great progress. As I mentioned before, having a shared plan that's aspirational in some respects has proven really useful for attracting outside funding. Collectively, we're getting close to $4 million invested in this work around the inlet from sources outside council coffers. So really nice to be able to see that money coming in to support this work. There's a huge amount of community engagement. We've had over 28,000 volunteer hours put into work around the inlet over the last 10 years. If you multiply that by a modest contractor rate, that would be over $800,000 worth of in-kind support, which shouldn't be overlooked either. With Jobs for Nature grants coming to an end, the progress on this work is likely to slow down significantly unless other funding opportunities come up, but that's not looking very hopeful at the moment. It's really important that we keep working together. Even just making slow, steady progress is a positive thing for the inlet and the communities connected to it. Thank you.
Yes, Guy, you're only a minute over, so that's not bad. But what I'm going to do is allow 2 questions, because this is a fantastic project. I'm lucky that I get to see it once a week when I cycle around the trail. And I did notice there were 60 black swans there earlier this week, which caused me some heartache going forward. So I've got Councillor Kittermont, anyone else has got a question? And Councillor McKenzie. So 2 quick questions and then we'll wrap up. Councillor Kittermont.
Thank you. Through the Mayor. Guys, thank you so much for all you do. When I go to the meetings, I come away buoyed by the amount of energy that generated from the group. And the group is not only willing participants, but they're actively out there submitting for what does David do? Submitting on all these petitions that we've got there. This group is absolutely worth its weight in gold. And if you can ever get alongside them and help them out, please, I suggest that you do. So thank you for the work you do. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Mike.
That wasn't really a question, but that's good. Councillor McKenzie.
Through you, Chair. Thanks, Guy. Love your enthusiasm as usual. I mean, it's so fantastic to see the progress that's been made. And I think in many respects, it's probably a story which many people who live in the district don't know and haven't really appreciated. One, the value of that whole ecosystem actually, and the progress that's been made. So how do you think we can tell the story more to sort of elevate what's been achieved and its significance?
Yeah. How could we tell the story more? I think that I guess from all of the partners taking the opportunities that come up, whether that be through the media, but also I think that the community days that invites the public in are a really powerful way to get people engaged. I mean, the whole communicating these stories out is an area that we want to be able to put more energy in. I mean, we're quite at TET. We're quite a small team that has to spread our energy across a whole range of work. So, but if anybody here has any thoughts about how, I mean, perhaps something in the TDC news line could be a good opportunity to look at as well. But yeah,
I feel as though it's ripe for an environmental award.
Right. Well, I'm sure the news media in the back, Max has taken a hint and he'll write a nice story about it. In the Waimea Weekly, which is the paper that goes to every house in this area every week. So at least it gets read, which is, can't say the same for some of our others. Sky, I'd like to thank you for all your work. It's been a tremendous partnership and I look forward to it flourishing in the future.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
All right. So we'll just move on. So looking at any declarations of interest today. None. There are no late items. Confirmation of the minutes from the strategy and policy meeting held on the 14th of November 2024. Would someone like to move? Councillor Dakey, seconded Councillor McKenzie. I'll put those. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Reports. We're going to start today. It's slightly out of order that you had in your agenda because the staff have got some commitments. So I'll ask for Dwayne and Barry to come up. So we've got the report from them to start with. The strategy and policy activity report. Leading off, Dwayne, is it you?
Mr. Chair, thank you. Just to let you know, my section of the report is from the beginning of the report to halfway down page 119. So anything there I'm happy to field questions about. Oopsie on the one of the items, coastal protection policy, it says it's on track, but it's in amber. So probably just explain that it's on track because it's now been incorporated into another process which is on track. But previously that was to come to council earlier. So apologies for the confusion there. And probably just invite you to explain. We try to do an expose on any one of the work programs we have in every report, just to give a bit of more in-depth understanding of what's involved. So if there's any individual items that perhaps you want us to do a bit more of a write-up on in future reports, please let us know. Thank you.
All right. So any questions of Mr. Fletcher in his section of the report? I thought they were pretty clear and straightforward. Oh, you're having an easy day today. It doesn't necessarily happen to some of our other meetings recently.
Well, I may have a question.
Oh,
I just wonder, for the benefit of the community and council, Dwayne, perhaps you can just flesh out where we're at and where we're going with speed management plans. I think that would be beneficial.
Thank you.
Through the chair. That's cool.
Through the chair. So you'll recall that we went through a joint regional speed management plan process last year. It was signed off by the joint councils, and then and we tried to make that sure that plan was consistent with the draft rule that the new government issued. And unfortunately, it largely was, but one of the new process steps the new rule required, which was only added at the last minute, was we had to reconsult on the changes before implementing them. So there are about a dozen speed limit changes in consultation with the community at the moment. And I can't remember the timeline. I think it's March or April or something like that. We bring them back to you for confirmation. They are things like background speed limits for schools. So the school speed limits don't have to be consulted on, but if we're changing the background speed limit around the school, they have to. So they're included in there. There's some of the high risk rural roads and places like McShane Road. So we're getting feedback now. Much of the feedback we're getting is people contacting us and saying, we submitted on your last plan, can you just take that as given and pass it on through to council? So we're doing that to make it easy for people. Yeah, so that's where at the moment. The NZTA is consulting on some speed limits as well, and we're proposing to take a report to the Joint Regional Transport Committee on the 10th of March to consider a joint position on those. And we'll be in contact with you shortly, actually seeking your views on some of those changes. The main one that affects Tasman is the reversal of the speed limit just north of Wakefield from 60 back up to 70. The rest are out largely in Nelson's region. But you'll hear from us shortly about seeking your views on that, putting forward a proposition and getting your input.
So just a follow-up question. So previously NZTA had said that they weren't going to consult on that sections. Now they've had a change of heart. Is that the case? But
correct. Publicly, they've stated that. I looked up yesterday the website they use for consultation on the speed limit changes, and they aren't seeking input on that site for Wakefield directly. But the fact that they've made those comments publicly, we're just going to put the submission in.
It's strange consultation, isn't it? Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Mackenzie.
Two things. Just one to cover off on the speed limit. I read somewhere that even though they've said they're now going to consult, in actual fact, the rule has been decided and the rule is the rule, and actually consultation can't change the rule. So is there any truth in that?
That's a very good question, and I'm sorry I'll have to come back to you on it to see what wiggle room there is. I mean, certainly there must be some because they're consulting on some aspects of speed limit changes around the country. So I'll just need to get back to you and clarify the provision of the rule that they're relying on.
All right, thank you. And I just wonder, Dwayne, just to remind me, we've got the Waimea trunk water and wastewater project on track feasibility. Could you just give me the high level overview of the timing that we're going to work to with that project, and then what that will mean for perhaps the Wakefield community?
Cool. So essentially that one of the other items in there is actually around the wastewater modelling for the Waimea trunk main, and that's in the processes of being finalised as we speak. And it's showing that the trunk main from Wakefield all the way roughly to Three Brothers Corner here actually is largely at capacity, or at least with the commitments we've made to certain developments and connections, it will be at capacity in the future. So although that at capacity is slightly earlier than we anticipated, we fortunately do have a program basically to replace that trunk main from Wakefield through to Three Brothers Corner, and I believe it's all within the 10 years. The first tranche is Wakefield through to just north of Brightwater, and that is due to be completed, I think, in 27, 28. So that's a major piece of kit. The program delivery team are working on at the moment, and that will provide capacity for at least 30 years. And actually, we're trying to make sure that that pipe provides for longer, for about 50 to 80 years. And we're just getting some demographics done to confirm what the numbers are, so we can make sure that it goes in once, goes in right.
So if I could, I mean, that will all be important, I guess, to take into account when we do a next future development strategy, because I mean, what I'm hearing you say is that that will open up capacity for future growth.
Correct. I mean, the project is needed because even the growth of the next 30 years needs new capacity installed to provide for it. But while we're doing that, we want to make sure that we have an even longer term horizon there. And so, yes, there will be the pipe that's installed will have additional capacity over and above growth for the next 30 years, or at least be able to stage, because it's likely to be a pressure main. And so basically you beef up the pumping to provide additional capacity.
All done?
Well, I guess when it talks about the Richmond South Stormwater Program, I know it's slightly different, and it talks about designing of the channel for works uphill of State Highway 6. Where is the what is the uphill portion?
In all the Ball Creek tributaries make their way up through the existing deferred zoned and zoned land in Richmond South. So the Diamond Saw place, there is a creek at that point that carries up all the way up to Hill Street South, or at least will in the future. And there are other tributaries of Ball Creek further along. The next main one is between White Road and Ransau Road. It's an existing creek. So all of those need to be upgraded at some point in the future to cope for FDS type developments. And there are creeks that connect to those tributaries as well. So basically we're trying to make sure that we have all the information we need to make sure that we can size those creeks appropriately for the future. And it's a complex affair. One of the things that's coming to light as we do new stormwater modelling is that rain intensities in 2130, which is the horizon we're now using, are quite a bit higher than previous rain intensities. So potentially you either need more creek or we need to do creek and detention. So it's basically early planning for what will become a structured planning exercise next year. Effectively, you've got to work your development plan, your structure plan around drainage.
Yeah, it does seem very climate conditions seem very like a monsoon, don't they? It's what we're experiencing with the rain.
All right. No more questions of Mr. Fletcher? No, so we'll move on to Barry, Mr. Johnson. So your section of the report.
Thank you. I'll take the report as read, just a couple of updates since the report was written. So Plan Change 79, which was deferred zoning, further submissions closed yesterday. So we've had 23 or 24 submissions on Plan Change 79, and we've had 5 further submissions. So quite comprehensive submissions on that plan change. And we've got a tentative hearing date for mid-June to hear that plan change. And you'll notice under the freshwater section, I've highlighted some comments by the Prime Minister and the government's Q1 action plan around taking cabinet decisions. And we hope that they will give us a bit more clarity on timing on the way forward in terms of what we can potentially do in the freshwater space. I mean, that relates directly to how we might respond to the water conservation order and also issues with the likes of the Demetri Aquifer. So we've also written to the Ministry of the Environment seeking a bit more clarity around if the council were want to pursue a plan change, what the process would be to get the approval of the minister to do so. So we're just waiting to hear back.
My understanding is that you haven't got firm dates though, in terms of that.
No dates at the stage, no.
And there's been considerable slippage in the dates in relation to these national policy statements from what we had earlier.
Yeah, it has. So, I mean, the language has changed from, you'll see in the report, the language was we'll get national direction before Christmas. That was then likely to be around now, and now we're hearing from the Ministry of the Environment that officials have been asked to pause work on national direction package until the government consider the report on the future of the RMA and what that might look like. So yeah, it's very difficult to chart a course through all that uncertainty. So we can't sit on our hands. So the best thing, my advice is that we carry on. I mean, we've got growth pressures. We're charging ahead with our growth plan change to ensure we aren't putting any barriers in place in terms of housing delivery.
And I've listened to the Prime Minister last 2 weeks ago, and he said the RMA bill would be out before Christmas. That's what he said publicly. We'll wait and see. We've got a question, Councillor Mara.
Well, a couple of questions, Mr. Chair. So if I work backwards, so 4.43, the Port Motueka structural plan. So the 3 ward councillors met with the port user group in Tania and Steph. And it was really clear in the question we asked that would go back in terms of scope to the Motueka Community Board and the councillors before any more work was being done. I'm not sure that says that there. It says to council, and I'm not sure when the dates. So we're talking about slippage and uncertain dates. This is uncertain for me. I have no idea when the next step of this process is. It was before Christmas, Councillor Walker, that we went to that Port User Group meeting. Can't remember the time. But so what's happening in that space? Will scope still go back to the Motueka Community Board and Council? Or this sort of sounds like there's a document coming out for discussion? That's the first question.
Yeah, sure. So you'll see the workshop was cancelled. That was scheduled for this week.
Right.
The email that went out with that it had a brief description of the next steps given that. And so my understanding there's a commitment to iwi and to the Port User Group of that group that they would see a draft of the issues and options document before it was brought to council. So we're doing that at the moment. The first thing is you'll get some more information at the end of this week. And that includes ward councillors will get a copy of that document before it goes to the Port User Group. But what we've said is we want to provide that to iwi and Port Users Group so they can provide some feedback and comment on that so that we can now feed that back to the council in a workshop. But you, as ward councillors, will get a heads up before it goes to the Port Users Group as well.
Thank you. And the second question, Community Board?
And the Community Board,
okay.
Yes, I'll make sure that happens, yeah.
And then I think the next one's a statement. It's 4.37. Without over focusing on it. This is a similar narrative that was brought to the ward councillors for the workshop yesterday. And Diana did a fantastic job in turning a whole lot of potential issues into a positive stance in terms of all the great things about Motueka first, instead of starting out thinking, what the heck would you do anything there for? So it's just a comment because I know the tone changed in the workshop with Terry and the background stuff. And I know this was produced after that, but if we can just focus on the positive first, it'd be really great because everybody wants to live there. And one other question, the OENLFs in terms of 4.25, and I know it's going to come back at some stage. Something popped up the other day in terms of let's call it the sandbar at Port Motueka, because that's highlighted as being recognised as one of those. So was there more discussion to have before this is notified? Where are we with that?
Yes, there is more discussion. So we're working with iwi to finalise around the values that iwi values have in terms of those outstanding natural landscapes. And once that's done, then a draft plan change will be brought to council to have a look at. If council is comfortable, then that will go out to the community for feedback.
Thank you. Thank you.
Any other questions around the table? None? All right, Barry, thank you for your report and the updates. So we've got the motion to receive the activity report. Would someone like to move? Move, Councillor Marrow, seconded. Yeah, Councillor Button. I'm having a senior moment. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Thank you, gentlemen. And now we'll move on to the independent peer review of Waikoropupū Springs Conservation Order Catchment. So, Joseph, welcome. And online, we have your reviewer, Murray Close. So let's see if we can bring him up on the screen. Will that happen?
Sure.
Yep. Good morning, Murray. Nice to see you again. So over to you, Joseph. And
yeah, good morning, councillors. I just wanted to give a very brief background and a bit of a brief introduction. And Murray's got his report that he summarised to present. For completion, I've summarised the key aspects of the report from the independent peer reviewer in my report. And I'll let the chair put the recommendations for implementing the monitoring later. So the key thing is that the Water Conservation Order is a statute in itself. So it sits outside of the RMA. It's a legal thing. And a Water Conservation Order can only direct council through a Water Conservation Order in relation to matters related to water. So the order has specified some monitoring we have to do in terms of nitrate, DRP, oxygen and clarity, which we are doing. The order was gazetted in October 2023, so come October will be 2 years. And the order came with quite a massive recommendation report. And one of the key things in the recommendation report that the court made is that it wanted us to carry out an independent peer review of the council's catchment monitoring to address a few of the concerns that they have. And independent was a big word that the court made because it indicated they didn't want any experts that were involved directly through the procedure to do it. So Murray was not involved at all in the water conservation audit process, and Murray is a very well known and well respected and member of the Royal Society of New Zealand on hydrology and groundwater quality in New Zealand. And that's a brief introduction to Murray. In section 4.2, I outline what the court has basically said. Apart from the key monitoring in the springs, these catchment monitoring is to provide early warnings of changes in up-catchment water quality and that could adversely affect the Waikoropupū springs, and to ensure that reliance can be placed on the monitoring results to contribute to the preservation and protection of Te Waikoropupū springs. And last point is to provide high water quality data from key land users in the recharge area. Now, I allude to land use because the court can't put land use management directions through a water conservation order. It basically alludes that it has to be done through a regional plan, which is an RMA process. So I may at the end, Mr. Chair, with your indulgence, may get Lisa and Mocha to address the land in the plan part, because that input is really critical in another 3+ years for us to be able to run models. If not, we can't. So without further ado, the very brief time Murray has spent a lot of time with all the experts who are involved in the order, 2 catchment visits. We engaged with all the parties, including the community board, which was very positive and constructive, and all the players that were involved in the hearing were directly consulted. So I will now pass on to Murray to cover his presentations, and you're welcome to ask questions of Murray and myself, and then maybe we would address a little bit of the land stuff and then go to the recommendation, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so I just wanted to know, Murray, do you want questions as we go or at the end of your report? Probably better at the end if people can hold their questions till then.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, thanks. Okay, thanks very much for the opportunity, Mr. Chair, to present this stuff. And Joseph's already given a good introduction, so I'll probably skip through the first 2 slides pretty quickly. Can I have the next slide, thanks? Yeah, just in summary, the Te Waikoropupū springs are the largest and clearest springs in New Zealand. You'll be very well aware of that. They look absolutely stunning. Main flows 10,000 litres per second in the main spring, 3.5 in the fish spring sites, and extremely high quality, clarity, sorry. They're listed as a water of national importance for biodiversity. The nitrate levels are very low, but there is concern over increasing levels over the past 20 years, which has led to the application for the water conservation order and the hearings. Next slide, thanks. Joseph's already covered this, and in particularly the recommendation that the independent review was undertaken. And a key thing they wanted in that future monitoring was that early warning changes in catchment water quality would be covered by the future monitoring program. Next slide, thanks. So I'm going to cover the process that I went through for the review, comment on the analytical methods and reviews, look at the goals, criteria for the monitoring, and how that led to the selection of particular groundwater and surface water sites, and talk about the analytical costs very briefly, because Joseph's also summarised that in your meeting report. Next slide, thanks. So in the past year, I had 2 trips to the Takaka catchment, one in July to look at the area, to talk with people, and the second one to, again, talk with a whole lot of people about the draft monitoring program and approach that I developed. For both visits, I was accompanied by Joseph, and that was really good because he has an extensive knowledge of the catchment, the issues, the processes. And so I talked with many groups. I won't go through them all, but started off with TDC staff in Richmond, and then talked with the community board twice, Ngāti Tama iwi on 2 occasions as well. In fact, all of the above groups, I think, apart from the Save the Springs and the cavers, I talked with on 2 occasions. So that was really, really useful. I also read through many of the reports, including material from the Environment Court hearing and the relevant recommendations, and had useful conversations with other researchers who'd been involved in the process, including Andrew Fenimore from Manaki Whenua, Roger Young from Cawthron, Mike Stewart and Uwe Morgenstern from GNS, and the laboratory managers who've been carrying out the analyses, Craig Radford from Hill Laboratories and Magali Moreau from GNS. Next slide, thanks. So moving to the analytical methods, the TWS mainspring has been analysed most extensively of all the sites. There were 5 samples collected in the 1970s, and there's been regular quarterly monitoring since 1990, and more recently it's been a monthly monitoring. A point I want to make about the analytical methods, that the methods have evolved and improved over time. The main methods have been ion chromatography and cadmium reduction with colorimetric detection. Now, Hill's lab has used cadmium reduction for low levels of nitrate for all of its work in the Tākaka catchment. GNS has used ion chromatography, 2 methods. They have a regular method which is suitable for a wide range of nitrate concentrations, which has a detection limit of 0.01 milligrams of N per litre. And they have a low-level method which they use for the samples in the Tākaka catchment. And that's been developed, well, it was developed in 2018 and has been used for the samples since then. It's been really good that TDC has collected replicate samples since 2018. And they have been replicated using 3 different methods. GNS low-level IC, which is used for the mainspring and a Fish Creek spring site, and the Hill Lab cadmium reduction method, which is used for the mainspring and also one of the Fish Creek spring sites, and any other monitoring that's been done by TDC. They also included the regular ion chromatography method, which is used for higher nitrate levels. What was found was there's no significant difference between the GNS low-level IC method and the Hill Lab cadmium reduction method. Now, these are the 2 main methods used, or the only 2 methods used for the ongoing monitoring. There was a difference between the 2 Hill Lab methods, the cadmium reduction, which is used for the low-level samples, and the regular ion chromatography method, which is used for the higher nitrate levels. But that's actually not particularly relevant to the monitoring being carried out for the TWS and the Tākaka catchment more generally. The key point is that there's no significant difference between the 2 methods being used for monitoring nitrate in the springs and the rest of the catchment, so we can have confidence in the methods currently being used. We don't have anything prior to 2018 in terms of replicate sample comparisons. So moving on to the goals. obviously the main goal was to enable compliance with the Environment Court directives, and one of the main directives was to provide early warning of up-catchment changes in water quality. There was a lot of discussion during the Environment Court about what you could rely on in terms of the monitoring results. So we want to make sure that the future monitoring is robust. And we also want to provide high quality data from key land uses in the recharge area that'll enable much better constraints for the hydrology, flow, and water quality models to assist with management. Because there was also quite a lot of discussion during the Environment Court hearings about the different models. The key difference between the models was the assumptions, but there wasn't the data, the high quality data from the different land uses to actually test those assumptions and distinguish between the two different models. So that's definitely a goal for the future monitoring program. Next slide. So the criteria, and one more, thanks. That leads to criteria for future monitoring sites. The first two are criteria that you use for any monitoring program. You want safe and easy access to sampling, good cooperation from the landowner, and ability to collect high quality samples. And in this context, the high quality also refers to the need to be able to collect some quantity information, either from a groundwater level for a well site, or from a flow or a stage from a surface water site. In Tākeka, it's characterised by karst hydrology, and you've got water in streams that suddenly disappears into the aquifer and then reappears as springs. So ideally, you want the site that can be sampled throughout the year with minimal dry periods. And that'll be shown an example in terms of the selection. You also want the sources of water to be relatively well understood, because one of the things we're trying to do is get characterization of what sort of water quality is associated with each of the land uses. So therefore we want the sources to be well understood. And we want the water being sampled to provide information for at least one of the goals referred to in the previous slide. Now, if all of those things are met, then existing sites with historical data are an advantage because it gives a longer time record. Thanks. So I won't go, yes, I will go through this one. The plan is to sample all sites monthly for a year and then carry out a review to make sure that the monitoring program is fit for purpose and is delivering the sort of information that we hope for. The samples be analysed for a comprehensive suite on the first sampling occasion, which will provide context for interpretation of future results, and it'll also provide a baseline for consideration of future land uses. Subsequent samples will be reduced for a focused or reduced suite of parameters. Next slide. Yep. So this is the full set. Field measurements, including some quantity information like groundwater or flow. Nutrients, this is the key reason for monitoring. That's what's going to impact the clarity at the springs. The major ions are the next suite, and they provide information on mixing and providing constraints for models. The heavy and trace metals, the fourth line down, they're expected to be very low, but we want to carry them out on the first occasion to provide a baseline, which will be really useful for future land use developments. And there's been some referred to in discussions. The age things, sorry. The oxygen 18 provides some information in terms of the source of recharge, and the tritium provides age dating, and that'll be carried out, the tritium, just for the first sampling occasion. Sorry, the reduced set, yeah. So the parameters in red, they're the ones that are specified by the Water Conservation Order: dissolved oxygen, nitrate and DRP. So they're there definitely. Probably we can cut out the total phosphorus and total organic carbon because we're suspecting, well, we suspect that the main parameters are the DRP and DOC. Major ions would want to keep going with. The heavy trace metals were expected to be low, so probably cut those out. And tritium will only be doing 2 further samples at the spring sites at high and low flows. We'll collect monthly samples, but only analyse 2 of those, and they'll be analysed as part of a GNS research program. Thanks. So moving to the selection of the monitoring sites, the key knowledge gap or key goal was the impact of upgradient land uses. So it's focused on the recharge area and looking at different sources and different land uses. So right up the top, and I don't think I can, no, I can't use a mouse. There are 3 blue sites associated with the 3 springs. They are specified by the Water Conservation Order. Then the green sites are the rivers. And as we move down, we've got the Wanaro at Hanging Rock. And that gives an idea of what the water quality is like in the hill country to the west of the catchment. Down further, the Takaka at Harwoods, and that gives an idea of what's the water quality in the southwest hills. And the site a bit further up from that is the Takaka at Lindsay's Bridge, and that gives an idea of what the water quality is like just upstream of where the Takaka River loses most of its water to the Marble Aquifer. So moving on to the next slide, which is a blown up version of the rest of the catchment. We've got orange sites indicating the Takaka Gravel Aquifer, blue sites indicating the marble, and red indicating the limestone aquifer. So moving from the right-hand side, sorry, we'll keep going a little bit on that last slide yet. We've also got 3 black sites, which we initially looked at to provide an indication of what was coming from the upland marble. Those sites, talking to the experts in the caving system, probably 80 or 90% of the time are definitely marble aquifer from the upland marble water, but occasionally when the Takaka River's in flood, the levels reverse basically, and you can get water from the Takaka River entering the lower parts of the springs and cave systems. So what we've selected is the 2 water quality supply sites in Gorge Creek and Ironstone Creek, which have a permanent supply and can be sampled easily. And then going further across, we get groundwater quality from the different water quality, different land uses rather. The 3, I guess straight above on East Takaka, we've got 3 wells there that gives very similar nitrate concentrations. They all give an indication of land use east of the Takaka River. So we've selected one of those. And likewise for the 2 limestone samples, we've selected one of those. They're very similar nitrate concentrations. So the next slide gives a summary of what has been selected. 15 proposed sites, the 3 springs, 3 rivers, the 2 creeks, which give an indication of the upland marble. And then we've got 2 wells in the marble aquifer, 4 in the Takaka gravel, and 1 in the Takaka limestone. I've probably slipped through that fairly quickly, but you can ask questions if desired. So we've obtained quotes. The quotes don't include TDC staff time for the collection of samples. And the analytical costs are around about 60,000 for the first year for the chemistry and the isotopes. And there's a breakdown of those costs in the report. Next. Just a few further comments. During the discussions with different people, a number of suggestions came up in terms of potential investigations that could assist the monitoring program, the interpretation of the information, but were outside the scope of being a regular monitoring program. So these were things like better understanding of cave and spring flow paths and dynamics, specific monitoring, which would probably have to be a bit more frequent and have to be a bit closer to the actual farming practice. Looking at farming practice that would reduce leaching, help the water quality in the springs, and looking at what the impacts of gorse and broom might be in the catchment. They are known to fix nitrogen quite a lot and can leach that through, but all of that work has been done in other catchments around Rotorua. So there's an opportunity to do some work within the catchment on that. And then finally, I was asked to comment on the who should be doing this work. In my view, TDC is the agency with responsibility for implementing the Water Conservation Order. It has good access to all the sites. It has trained and qualified staff. It's obtained funding in the past and has the responsibility for doing that in the future for monitoring sites, and also has a good process for reporting and disseminating results to the public. And therefore, in my view, TDC should be responsible for carrying out the monitoring program. And I think that's it. Any questions?
Thanks, Murray. So I've got a couple of people with questions, but I've got one first for Joseph, and it's a pretty simple one. My understanding is we have the budget for this. So that's because this year budgets are tight.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, we budgeted this through the long-term plan because the order was anticipated way back in 2022. So the funding is there. We're not asking for more money. So it's expectation of the community we do it.
So Councillor Hill was first, and then I've got Councillor Murray.
Kia ora, Murray.
Yeah,
look, I really appreciated the quality of the engagement with the community at home. So the wide range of groups and people that you met with, and certainly the meetings I was at with Community Board and the Mana Whenua whānau, very well received and pretty informative. And some of that caving knowledge is pretty interesting, isn't it? What some of those cavers are ferreting around and amongst, and what that informs. Just fascinating, actually. I've got a question that's a bit outside the realms of the purpose of this, I suppose. There are concerns about if the Stamps Creek mine was to go ahead, that there was any failure of any dams up there and things that there's a risk to the aquifer. So, would any of this monitoring address being able to pick up anything that went wrong? Was that just simply unknown at this point about where that water system would flow?
Yeah, I guess two things. The monitoring of, or the inclusion of the heavy and trace metals in the initial sampling occasion, in that first sampling occasion, they're expected to be very low at the moment. And the few samples that have been taken with heavy metals have been low. But including heavy metals for all of the sites in that first sampling occasion would establish a baseline for all of those sites in the Tākaka Valley. So that would provide a baseline level that any future impacts could be assessed against. In terms of the, and I haven't been asked to address that, so this is just, I guess, my comments off the board. is that if there is slow leakage of contaminants from the mine activities, all of the water quality, all of the waters in the catchment are highly oxygenated, and therefore the heavy metals would be likely to precipitate out fairly quickly. They're really mobile at low pH and under reduced conditions. I think probably a more concerning thing would be if there was a tailings dam associated with mining and there was a rupture in the tailings dam. In that case, I think most of the water would head down the surface waterways. But I'm not in a position to comment really on that one. But that in my mind, the most significant.
I think that's outside the scope.
It's interesting though, isn't it? There's some monitoring systems being set up, that's been proposed, and looking at something that it might address in the future. And there is a question about the WCO as a council and as a district. We have to abide by that. And I guess we're in the business with the government or the coalition around things that get fast tracked, and RMA considerations aren't taken into account. And just what's council's position then about the WCO, where we have to, it has to be implemented, but there's that tension there, isn't there, around. So I think there's a big question there for council around that and how that fits into the wider machinations that are happening around fast tracking, actually.
I think it's the outside of the scope of this report, and we've got some time pressure, council.
Interesting though, isn't it, Chair?
Might be interesting, but it's outside the scope of this report. So we'll move on to Councillor Shellcrest, and then I've got Councillor Mara, Board Member Dixon, and Board Member Graham. You're welcome to join the table. I know you came in late, so at any time.
Through the chair. Thanks, Mary. A lot of information there. Hey, mine's just around the costing. I mean, everything costs. I was a bit surprised of the numbers there, and that's excluding all the staff's time. Obviously, the first lot of monitoring is going to be a lot higher. Do you anticipate it dropping down much moving forward with this monitoring?
Yes. $13,000 of that annual monitoring was actually for tritium analysis on the first sampling occasion. So going forward, and there's a bit of a detail in the table that sort of supports that. So yeah, it would be probably going forward around the sort of $45,000 per year for doing all of that sites. But that's also the purpose of carrying out a review after 12 months to actually check that in terms of what is needed. Actually, the heavy metals are dropped out as well, so it would be lower than that as well. But the big cost is the tritium analysis on the first sampling occasion.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. We don't have a choice. It's a court order. Councillor Murray?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A similar question. So I'm on page 45. It's the table 5, where it's got the yearly costs and the ongoing costs. So the graph that was up on, the table that was up on the PowerPoint showed the tests that we had to take in terms of the WCO, which I think was 3 red dashes amongst those. Is there an additional cost for testing all the others outside of what the WCO specified? Yes, that one. That's the one. So I think in the presentation it was talked about these are the ones that we have to do.
Well, they were the ones. They're the ones that are specified in the water conservation. I've also excluded clarity, which is already being monitored under a separate contract with NIWA. So there were 4 of them: dissolved oxygen, nitrate, DRP, and clarity. The others are, I guess, implied by the directives to provide some indication of what's going to, some characterization of the water quality from up gradient land uses which are likely to impact the springs, and that's the rationale in terms of the why we want to do, for example, the major ions, because it does provide key information for mixing and providing constraints to the models. There are known relationships at the springs between flow rates and chloride concentrations, for example, and that can actually provide really useful insights, but we don't have that information for further up in the catchment. So that's where those additional parameters come in.
I could just hear my sixth form science teacher saying should have paid more attention. So I think the plain answer is that if we saw an increase in nitrates, then actually the answer to that question would come from some of the other readings and measurements you got there. So that's fine with me. So my only other question is in terms of the first year where it's more intense, would there be a planned cycle to do years 3 or years 5 in terms of more in depth? Because you'll have baseline, but then you'll have nothing to test that baseline against if you don't have future significant tests. Choosing words.
Joseph, are you going to reply to that?
Murray, happy for you to add. Two things to add context to Councillor Mara's question. If you're intimately involved in the order, some of the testing sought by some of the parties were huge compared with that list. The court really struggled to specify what are the other things we should monitor. And that's why they said get an independent expert and they can tell you what's the right thing to monitor. I had a scare when I looked at what some of the applicants to the order sought. It's far more than that list. So that's a bit of context. And the second question I'm going to defer to Murray, because it's proposed that until we got 1 year of data, we can review it. And whether we have to do frequently another set of more intensive tests or change the suite, I don't know. So, Murray, I'm happy for you to respond, Murray.
Yeah, I mean, I think, there was a couple of other questions that I was asked to take into account, which I haven't talked about, and that was the need for new sites as well. And I did some discussions with because all of the sites are either surface water sites that can be accessed readily or they're existing well sites. There was also some significant discussion in terms of whether we needed additional wells drilled. And I had discussions with the well driller who had done the last major, most recent well into the Marble Aquifer, and the costs were over $300,000 for that single well. So I took that into consideration when I was designing the well and the monitoring program. And so we've avoided major installation costs. Joseph's had to do a few minor things like getting access to be able to measure water table and stuff like that, but they're very minor. They've stayed away from the major costs. But the point of having the review after 12 months of data is to address the sort of question you're raising. So is the monitoring program, as seen in the first 12 months, fit for purpose? Is it delivering the sort of information that's going to be needed for good management of the springs and parameterization of models that are going to actually assist us with that? And so it's anticipated that the monthly monitoring will keep going while that review process has taken place, and then presumably that review would be presented back to council.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Happy to move. I think it's right reply, doesn't it?
We'll just move on, Joseph, because we'll do that. You'll have to review it as the. I'm going to we have some time constraints. Board Member Dixon has got a question.
Thank you, through the chair. Hi, Murray. Just that answer kind of covered what I was wondering about. Just whether the sampling sites that you've selected, do you consider them to be optimal sites throughout the the aquifer to address the needs of the water conservation order, or would perhaps in the future, if new wells were dug, would they be added to it if they were in better locations?
Yeah. My thought is that they are the best sites available at this stage. There is one site over east of the Wanara River that I'm not so sure about, and we're going to look at the data as part of that. It's a relatively shallow well into gravel, so it wouldn't be an expensive one. But I've had some discussions with Joseph in terms of whether that one's best. Apart from that, at this stage, they are the best ones, I think, for the future monitoring program, but we'll assess that after a year.
Thank you. Another quick question, just about the gorse and broom. I found that interesting. So up to 9% of the nitrogen contribution. With the forestry in the catchment up the valley there, a lot of that, when that gets taken out, reverts to gorse and broom. So there's scope for a significant increase in that source. Is that going to be taken into account?
Yeah, well, the well that I just referred to east of the Wanara River is potentially down gradient of an area that's currently mapped as gorse and broom. And so I'm wondering whether that might pick that up, but I'm not sure whether it's optimally located for that. But the other point is that I think most of the work that's been done on the gorse and broom has been done up in the Rotorua catchments. So I imagine most of that work would translate to Takaka, but it would be good to actually check that out. And I guess there's some more detail in terms of some future work that could be done reasonably easily in that area in the report.
Thank you.
That's good. Right. I've got one more person with a question, Councillor Butler.
Thank you. Yeah, I just thought it might be helpful to just put in, just to go over the context of what the water conservation order is asking for in terms of the reduction in the levels of nitrate and by when. So, you know, what is the aim? Where are we going? I thought it might just be helpful to have that here now.
It's Joseph's probably.
Yeah, that's what I'm asking. Yeah.
Yep. Lisa, you can correct me, but I think we've got a 15-year timeline. But because of doing the 5-year averages, we'll have to be 5 years before that. Because if you look at the statistics, we're supposed to report on 5-year medians. So we started technically October 2023. So 2028 is when we first report. And it also says that if we don't meet 0.45, which is the interim part, then we carry out investigations, which we are actually doing. Now, since Lisa is up here and Mocha's also at the back, if I may cover up, Mr. Chair, that part about the land use, the court directs it in the recommendation report, but they cannot write it in the order. And I know Murray emphasised the importance of getting these laws for the water monitoring and the models, and then tie it back. So I'm over in your hands.
Got some time constraints, but from we will be waiting on farm plans, which have been put on hold. So
yeah, just to cover off through the chair, Councillor Butler's question. So the limit is set at 0.41 milligrams per litre in 2038. So that's the goal that we're aiming for. As Joseph said, the compliance statistic to determine whether we're meeting that limit needs 5 years of data. So we won't be able to do that assessment until June 2028 at the earliest. And just in terms of the farm plans, yes, that is putting a bit of a spanner in the works. The fact that they do not apply in the Tasman at the moment, they were meant to apply this January until the government changed that process, and we don't currently have a clear date as to when they are going to come back into force. We were hoping to avoid having to duplicate the entirety of the regulations in the plan change, but we may have to consider that to keep progress going forward, but we'll be bringing it back to council at a later date.
Correct. I've got one more person with a question, Councillor Kittermont, and then I've got a mover. I intend to find a seconder and put this report. Oh, seconded Councillor Butler. So, Councillor Kittermont.
I didn't have a question. In the interest of time, through the chair, I was going to second it.
Move Councillor Mara. Seconded Councillor Butler. Move Councillor Mara. Seconded Councillor Butler. So I want to thank Murray for the report. It was good to meet you before you started. This is a court order. It's a direction, and it is a treasure. It's the Springs, and I make a point of visiting them once a year when I'm in Golden Bay. So it's very, very important going forward. So we've got the report, and the good thing is Joseph has secured the budget for this. So you've got the motion up on the table. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. What we're going to do now is take a 5-minute break to take a cup of tea, because we've got a staff member who has to come in. So we could call her to bring her into town. It's going to take her 15 minutes to get here, and we can do some of the other stuff during that time. So if you like to go and grab a cup of tea and bring it back, that would be great. And I've given them 10, so we will start. All right, so the next item is my chair's report. All I've done there really is outline the amount of work that we've got to do before the end of the triennium, which is quite a bit. So we're not slowing down because this work has to be done. So would someone like to move and my report be received? Move Councillor Kittermont, seconded Councillor Butler. I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? You didn't have a question. I knew you didn't have a question. Right. Next item is item 7.3, Heritage Advisory Group Terms of Reference. Your report.
Yeah, so at the last Strategy and Policy Committee meeting, you resolved to form an advisory group, which I have suggested doesn't include an elected member on that. It's that it would be officers and the group. Just a reminder that the government is looking at national direction about making it easier to add and subtract heritage buildings from the list currently in our tier MP, which would mean that it wouldn't require a plan change. So I just want to be in front of that one really, in case that comes quicker than we expect, although we keep hearing things are being pushed out. I've had a couple of questions posed to me prior from a couple of elected members. The first was from Councillor Greening around the what I would call the tenure or the length of the formation of that advisory group. I suggested it coincided with the election timeline, so 3 years, which we're slightly out of kilter. That allows new councils to reform if they so choose. Those advisory groups were a bit out of kilter, so I guess a decision will be made whether or not it ceases at this election or whether or not it continues to the end of the next triennium. And the other question was around reporting back. Look, I've not put much detail of thought into what that reporting back is, but I think it's appropriate that that advisory group does report back in terms of progress to date, because it does require some officer investment in there. So we've just got to continually understand whether or not there's value in that. So I'll take the rest of the report as read and take any questions.
All right, I've got 2 people with questions so far, Councillor McKenzie and then Councillor Dakey, but I'm sure there'll be more.
Thank you very much through you, Mr. Chair. Look, John, thank you very much for progressing this. I know that in particular, the Waimea South Historic Society have really advocated for this, and they want their expertise to be able to be pulled on for the benefit of the heritage protection across the district. Certainly at the Wakefield Community Council meeting on Monday night, some members of the society stood up and talked about how enthusiastic they are and all that volunteer effort and knowledge. It's so great to be able to harness that. So look, I just really I'm actually happy to move the recommendations in the report, which include confirming that we don't need an elected member on it. So yeah, thank you for the work you've done on it. Happy to move.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Dakey's next, and then come on.
Thank you, through the chair. Happy to second this. This brings tremendous value to the council at little cost, because we're not in a position to be able to fund a heritage role. This brings real expertise and attracts more energy to this. And yeah, really think it's going to be a positive movement for the community.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. Councillor Kittermont.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, how are you going to promote this group? Are you going to put it in the newsline? We need to get it out there that we've got this ability within the TDC. So we need to not just have it, but also promote it and invite people from the ratepayers to come in.
So the Waimea Historic Society have reached out across the district for interest in this. So there's been about 7 entities of significant interest from as far afield as Collingwood down to Tupperware. So the message is getting out there through those channels. I think there's quite a network there. Sure, we can do some publicity, but I think the formation of the group, I think it's in a good space, and I think there's people out there ready to put their hand up to volunteer.
Right, Councillor Hill.
Thanks, Chair. So has he got into this would be one of those things where people have an interest and put their hand up and say, "Oh, really happy to contribute," or where you'd have ensure you had a ward distribution as well? Because, you know, we're potentially setting up a bit of a cultural precinct over there in Mohua, and I know there's some people pretty interested in, that's how we're framing it these days. Got the War Memorial there, got the museum, going to possibly have something else. But, you know, some people are pretty keen on heritage in Golden Bay, and you say in Rockville, and the museum out there. So I'm just wondering how you'd attend to ensuring the district was represented.
Well, the answer, I know we've had interest from Golden Bay, from Collingwood. So I think we've got enough spread initially to kick this off.
The questions are about whether you'd sort of ensure that was always the case. You just happen to have someone from Collingwood and happen to have someone from Mapua, you know, whether you'd actually have something in the tour about ensuring, you wouldn't have to say we want one from each ward, but you might say ensuring that there is the district's represented to a competent degree. I just also noticed that the comment around ensuring the role of the group is clearly defined. I just thought that might have come through in this report already, but I guess that's still being developed. Thank you.
Okay, I'm sure the manager will take that on board. Councillor Dow.
That was quick. Right, I'm just concerned about the election period. You're just talking 3 years. I sort of feel that it should be continued to 1 year after the election, so it goes, even though for 3 years, it goes past the election cycle for the 1 year. Because, like, I'm not being rude or anything, but there could be a 50% change in councillors this year, and by the time all those new councillors get their feet under the table and understand the processes, you're also going to be throwing a heritage committee out at the same time. I think you've got to give them time to work out directions, what's happening, give the heritage people come along to a meeting, talk about what they do, and then the council makes the decision after that. I just think aligning it with the actual election period is not quite right.
Well, I think that makes sense. I don't know that it has to, it's not in the motion, so it's, yeah, it's just something for the manager to take on board, and I think it's a valid point. I'm not going to say no, I'm seeing nods around the table, so, but it's not in the motion, so it's pretty simple. All right, so it's been moved, Councillor McKenzie, seconded Councillor Dakey. No other questions of the manager? No, so I'll put the report. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Right, now we move to item 7.4, Waimea Inlet Action Plan Progress Report. Anna, that's yours, if you'd like to come up. And that was a very good presentation this morning. It's always a pleasure to see what's going on in the estuary and the value for money we get out of that groups.
Yes, and with that in mind, I'll just take my report as read and happy to answer questions. Thank you.
All right, Councillor Ellis, you've got a question?
Not really. I have a comment and I'd like to move the report. I just want to reiterate something that Sky touched on, and that is the huge amount of passion and the huge amount of work done by the volunteers in the community. I've had the opportunity, a couple of times to be out there, and the passion that comes to that table is mind blowing. And you can see the visible results now of how far the different actions by all the different groups that come back to report around that table are having in that environment, and the uptake by landowners in the area. It's a really good example of the community taking ownership, often financial responsibility, and working with all the groups within the region to actually achieve something, and really well supported by staff, to help coordinate that. So very happy to endorse this report.
Are you going to move it? Yep. Right. So we've got to move it. Other questions of Anna?
No, I don't have a question. Just to said it all before. Happy to second. Thanks.
Councillor Murray? No.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just going to actually just echo, but also point up, and this is the good news stories when council working with the community works really well. So just want to acknowledge that. And with such a good introduction, it's a shame you didn't go to your report, Anna. So just acknowledging the team, the humbleness of your report, but the partnership's awesome.
If there's no other questions, I've got, Councillor Dowler, I've got. And maybe Councillor Hill. But Councillor Dowler, you had a question?
Yep. The 5 points report has informed the council dog bylaw review to encourage appropriate use of the inlet ledge, Just with the group that's going out there, as spoken about in the public forum, and do their protection, their trapping and all that sort of stuff, could the new cat bylaw be sort of reported on, like if they're out there trapping stuff and they start trapping cats? We've got no other real way of getting that much information of what's being trapped, surviving, euthanized or whatever. So I thought this group might be a good option, and it's close to town. It's right there. It's not out in the sticks where a lot of the problems are, but it sort of might be a way of gathering information. That was all.
Through the chair, there is already monthly reporting of trap catches that happens and is distributed. They're quite a big network of people in the community. I think it's coordinated by a TET. But yeah, I'm not sure that comes up through council. I don't know if Rob knows. But you can probably go on the email list if you're interested personally. I could pass on the details because I received it. Yep, I can do that for you. Thank you.
Councillor Hill, did you have a question?
This has probably been covered, I think. I just might have forgotten, but I just wonder how well it's known, the progress that's made and the investment in it in all sorts of ways, like how widely that's known. You made the point around up from the ward. We could start a new award, couldn't we? But I don't know how much, TET don't want to be putting too much resource into singing their own praises or the praises of. But I think these things, they do, if people know more widely just the extent of what's being progressed, it does motivate and help others sort of think, oh, well, God, well, let's do it too, and here's our wee inlet or something. So I don't know what the response is, but I wonder what could happen more other than our media releases and our news lines and things, but getting out a bit further would be, we rely on Max quite a lot, and just sort of thinking of, a wider understanding of actually the significance.
Through the chair, that's a good point, and we've got an upcoming coordination group meeting in a couple of weeks' time, so I'll bring that to the group as an agenda item that we can look at how can we expand the communication more. There are several things that happen that possibly aren't tied to Waimea Inlet Coordination Group as such, but there's, talks at the libraries about people like George Daly have talked about the Waimea Delta work they're doing, and all sorts of little things have happened, but it's not really kind of branded as such as a wider project.
And perhaps the end point is around this, the status of the whole inlet, so the largest, however it's defined in the South Island in terms of what is it, enclosed? I don't know what it's called, but that must be a good catch. Yeah.
They're certainly getting good volunteers. When I go past, I see 30, 40 people at times. So there's good buy-in from the community. I must say they tend to be of the older age group, but you also do see a lot of ones from Waimea College and the different schools down there as well at different times. Councillor Kittermont, and then we'll put the motion. Oh, Councillor Walker, sorry, I missed you. So Kittermont, then Walker.
Thank you. Through the chair, if you could just clarify, the trapping is for stoats, weasels, rats, mice, those sorts of things, not for cats. The cats can't get into the traps. Is that correct?
I'm not a trapping expert, but yes, different traps are for different animals. But yeah, I will leave it at that because I'm not involved in the actual trapping. Does Rob want to say something? Or no?
Mr. Smith, have you got a comment?
Yeah, through the chair, that's okay. So the traps that for the Battle for the Banded Rail are targeting mustelids and rats. If you want to trap a cat, then you normally use a live capture trap, and that's the whole point of the bylaw around the microchipping, is then you have the opportunity to check to make sure it's not someone's pet. So normally cat trapping is quite a dedicated project aside or in conjunction with the other wider program.
Yeah, and it's also in our pet management plan. Councillor Walker?
Yeah, thank you. Through your chair, I just wanted to say that the Waimea Youth Councillors have been and participated as volunteers. They overrate the morning teas and the fact that they're so inclusive, and although they bring the age group down a bit, they always gain a really good learning of what's going on and then spread the word. So thank you for embracing their educational walk with you.
Yeah, it's one of our really good news stories, which is something we just need to make sure we push. All right, so Anna, thank you for your report. It's been moved. Councillor Ellis, seconded Councillor McKenzie. I'll put the motion that we receive the report. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Right, we now move to item 8.1, which is to move into confidential. So, Max, your time to lead. The public need to be excluded from the following parts of the proceedings. Yeah, thanks, Max. Look, it's not personal. We provided them with lunch at NRSBU recently, last week, and took them on a tour. And board members, I need to ask, are board members allowed to be present? I think they are. No? No? All right. Sorry, Henry. You've got to leave too. So the reason the grounds are under section 48 because it's commercially sensitive. So those are the reasons. Is that enough detail? It's all in the agenda. So Anna, would you like to come up? And we've got to wait a few minutes. Oh. Councillor Hill, are you happy to move that we move into confidential?
Well, yes.
Yes, thank you very much. I was just raising my hand. And Councillor Kittermont is going to second it. So we're moving into confidential. Move Councillor Hill, seconded Councillor Kittermont. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Now we have to wait a few minutes.